Well, thank you everyone for attending the Who You Can Become, the Benefits of Building Connections. My name is JC Dara. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and Student Engagement. I'm really excited to welcome you to the third installment of our Who You Can Become Alumni Speaker Series. And I'm happy to turn it over to our student moderator, Sydney Sherry. She is the memberships chair for our Student Leadership Council for Undergraduate Studies. So with that, I will hand it over to Sydney.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So as a short little introduction of our speaker today, Robert Q. Topper is a professor of chemistry in the School of Engineering at the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art, a unique and historic polytechnic college in the heart of New York City. He has also served as the chair of chemistry, medical technology, and physics at Monmouth University in New Jersey. Professor Topper earned a BS in physics and chemistry at Florida State University in 1986, and then completed a PhD in chemistry at Yale University in 1990. He then carried out postdoctoral research at the University of Minnesota and the University of Rhode Island before coming to Cooper Union in 1993. Professor Topper and his students use computers, quantum physics, and mathematics to predict and understand the structures and properties of atmospheric and fabricated nanoparticles, chemically damaged DNA, polypeptides, materials, surface absorbates, and chemical reactions at ultra-hot temperatures. His work has also included mentoring over 120 undergraduate, graduate, and high school students as research colleagues and co-authors. He is currently serving as a member of the organizing team for the International Virtual Winter School on Computational Chemistry, which freely welcomes students and scientists around the world to share the latest research in computational chemistry. So thank you for being here today, Professor Topper. So to start off, if you want to start by telling us a little bit about your time at FSU and maybe more specifically about your time in the honors program.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to just reminisce a little bit about a lot of good things that happened at FSU and maybe share some things that might be helpful to students now. So yeah, I mean, I came to Florida State as an undergraduate, not knowing what I was going to do really at all, other than I thought something science. One of the main reasons I came to Florida State was, well, there were several. One of them was that I thought it was really important for a scientist to have a strong liberal arts flair to their education. And so even as a high school student, I knew that I wanted that. And so when I looked at FSU and their curriculum, I saw that that's what I would be getting. And when I was invited to join the honors program, it was even better the way it was unfolding, because there were opportunities for small format courses, discussion format courses, as well as an enhanced honors version of traditional courses. And I just saw that I was going to get a chance to really spend time with the things I wanted to spend time with, in addition to the science that I wanted to focus on. But I still wasn't sure. So I wrote a letter. This is before email was invented. So I wrote a letter to the chair of the biology department, because I thought, I would be a biology major, and asked if I came to Florida State, would there be opportunities for me to do research. And he wrote back a couple of weeks later and said, yes, absolutely. Undergraduates have a place in our laboratories. There are things that you can do here. Please come. So that was, really the kicker for me. And I don't know if that answers the question. You were asking about my time at FSU in the honors program. So that was what brought me there. And the honors school really lived up to my expectations. The classes were terrific. I had some great instructors, and that includes chemistry. There was an honors chemistry section that I got into, and I wasn't really that interested in chemistry. It was okay, but my high school chemistry experiences were really, really bad, very negative. So I was not thinking of chemistry as a thing, but there was an honors chemistry, and I said, okay, let me try that. And it was just fabulous. You know, I had two great teachers, Garrett and Gedkin, for that sequence. And but the laboratory was what really got me sort of into the research that I wanted to do, because I don't know how it is now, but back then, if you did well the first semester in the lab and the lecture, and you had recommendations, then you could apply to help out in one of the research labs. And so I was successful, and I worked my second semester of lab in the laboratory of Robley Light, who's a biochemist. And that was just fantastic. You know, that was a wonderful experience for a freshman, a first year student. And I don't really know, you know, where else I would have had an opportunity to do that. It was really exciting. I really got the bug. And as time went by, as I continued on at Florida State, I found out that the chemistry department in particular was really open to undergraduates getting involved in research. So I went on to do research with Delis Datar and Jack Saltiel, and I spent significant times in both of those groups, and those were really key experiences for me, that really just came out of that first, you know, honors experience, which is, you know, yes, come on into the lab, let's do something.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. So, still on the topic of research and these honors chemistry classes, what do you think the honors program overall really helped you accomplish? Like, would you say it was more so like the research stuff or like the labs? Like, what's the
Well, I think that was part of it, right? The research, you know, really, you know, giving me positive reinforcement for and inviting me to get started, and making me feel like I could do something that was useful and good. Uh, but also, I will say, just in the honors courses, I just did so much writing, and I actually love to write, and I loved it then too. And the more writing you do, the better you get at it. And the more reading you do, the better you get at that too. So it was because of that liberal arts, you know, foundation that was particularly strong in the honors classes. That has had a huge impact on me. It made it so that I could, you know, write my thesis and do it well, and read the literature necessary to get into that and understand it, and you know, read quickly with focus. But really, I think mostly what you have from reading, and it's just your point of view. You know, if you have a holistic point of view, it's very different from a from completely narrowed in point of view. And I feel like the holistic point of view has really served me well. And again, those honors classes. I remember a seminar called "Being Human and Being Religious" that was particularly terrific my first year, and it was just so broad, and the conversations that I was able to have with other students during that class just made me realize I was surrounded by all these other smart people, you know, not just the professor, but everybody in the room had something, and that we could all learn from each other. And that is also super important in a for a scientist, because you always have to work with each other and learn from each other in order to get anything done.
Yeah, that's very true. So about the liberal studies, because we place here at FSU, we obviously place a very strong emphasis on liberal arts. What do you think in general you got out of your undergraduate experience at FSU?
Well, my undergraduate experience wasn't limited to just my coursework and even just my research. It also had to do with just getting involved, you know, being part of a university community. And I was really very much not like that as a high school student. I was kind of a loner, didn't really, you know, didn't do that much with groups. But I think when I came to FSU, little by little, I started to think, you know, maybe I could do a little bit more than that. And so just trying to stretch out and reach out, and you know, I think I ran for student government at one point. which was, it's kind of a strange thing to do for somebody who's a real introvert. But it kind of helped me get outside of myself a little bit more. And then I started, I play music, so I started performing at local bars. That also just sort of helped me, not be as, private a person, not as introverted. And then I joined the chemistry fraternity, which turned out to have a fantastic impact on me. Basically, the chemistry majors sort of dragged me in and said, "You have to join this. This group's a lot of fun." And as being part of that, I just learned about leadership and working together in an organized way to accomplish things together. And all of that together, it was a huge growth arc. So I feel like I had strong reasons for academic growth, but there was also a lot of personal growth, and it was all about community. Like, how do you connect with community? And that might be the most important thing I learned in college.
Yeah, thank you. So, what do you think, moving on, what do you think made you choose to pursue a career as a professor? Was it the research that you experienced here or the undergraduate experience?
Yeah, I thought about a lot of different careers. I looked at maybe joining the military. My father and my stepfather were both in the military. I looked at teaching, high school teaching as a possible career. But I think basically as I went, I just sort of decided that if I could do some significant research at the doctoral level, which kind of remained to be seen, but if I could do that, then maybe I could be a good research scientist, and maybe I could lead a group. And really what it's sort of evolved into over time, because I've also looked at careers in industry and other things like that, was I got so much from the professors that I worked with that spent their time with me, that believed in giving a student a chance to try things and learn things, providing resources for me, that I just sort of felt like, I should be trying to give some of that back. So if I can get a job where working with undergraduates is part of the deal, not just teaching but also research, then that's going to be a good fit for me, and that's what I found here at Cooper Union.
Yeah, thank you. So, how do you think, going back to the honors program, how did you think the honors program prepared you to advance to obtaining your PhD and then becoming now a chemistry professor?
Well, there were, I think the honors program specifically, again, I would just come back to all that writing and reading, the rigor of the curriculum had a huge impact on preparing me for graduate work. And also, again, because the honors classes, some of them were discussion based, just the ability to talk and disagree and hear other people's perspectives, listen to their point of view, uh, realize there's more than one right answer a lot of times to questions, especially questions that are deep and complex. Uh, you know, that was so important to me, and I don't think I would have learned those things if I hadn't been in the honor school, or at least it might not have been as direct and effective. I mean, there were lots of great faculty, lots of great courses that were not honors classes at Florida State. But like every single course in the physics department, they didn't have any honors classes. Just being being in the physics curriculum was honors enough. But still, the when I look at what was happening in the chemistry in the honors chemistry sequence, the problems that they were having us solve were just more complex and more detailed, and they sort of assumed that at the beginning we didn't need to go over and over the foundations, that we probably had those, or we could grasp them pretty quickly, and we could just move on into more interesting and complex material. And um, I feel like in the honors school that they really had faith in us as students, that they were happy that we were there, and they really were just like we know you can do something really great, and we want to see you do that and help you do that. And that's something that I think I got a little bit of that in high school, but not to the same step, not to the same extent as I got in the honor school.
Yeah, definitely. So with being a chemistry professor, a lot of these like harder STEM classes or even just general classes, how important do you think it is for students to have a strong connection with their professor?
It can be really important. It depends on the class, I think, a little bit. But the fact is, in some classes, you're in the physics courses in that particular curriculum, and also in the upper level chemistry classes, you're learning a lot from the other students. You're huddled up with them. You're trying to figure out how to solve these problems that you've been given, which are impossible. And between everybody in the group, somebody has a line on solving it usually, and so you figure things out. But on the other hand, you may not be able to get the big picture, right? Do you really sort of understand like why you're doing this thing right here? Why are you solving, this problem? Where is that going to lead to? And so when you talk to the professor, uh, when I talk to my professors, that's when I started to get a little bit more of a line on that. What is the big picture? Why do we have to memorize all these reactions in organic chemistry? I didn't love memorizing things, and so when I took organic, it was just like, oh, I just don't wanna. Why do I have to do this? But the professor had a policy of open office hours. You just drop in and ask anything, talk about anything. And so I did, and it wasn't an easy conversation. He was very much challenging, what I would ask about and what I would say, and he wasn't trying to be sort of like you know complimentary, overly complimentary or anything like that. He was just sort of like, oh, you got a lot of work to do. This isn't good. Your test scores are not great. And I was just like, well, I just don't understand. Why do I have to memorize all of this stuff? And he was like, you don't have to memorize anything. And, and I was like, what? It's like, yes, you don't have to memorize anything because these are the principles. You have to look at how things go mechanistically, and why do these reactions happen the way that they do. And then when you understand that, you don't have to memorize anything because you'll know how it goes, or at least you'll have a pretty good idea. And I just didn't get that at all from sitting in the lecture, in the big lecture hall. I just that did not penetrate. But one-on-one, uh, what he said started to, and so then you know, I had a plan. I understood that there was a structure to it that I just wasn't seeing yet.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. So you kind of just shared a personal success story that you had with a one-on-one with a professor, but do you have any personal success stories between you and a student or a colleague, or any examples of things that have really worked out for a student because of this connection?
Oh, well, I mean, for me as an advisor, I mean, I've had a lot of research students, right? And so sometimes the things that we do don't go a long way, and sometimes they just go a short way. But the fact is that when I do see the consequences, when I do see the outcomes, they're usually pretty big. So, for example, just the other day, I found out that one of my undergraduate research students that I've been working with for the last year and a half was named Goldwater Scholar, which is a big deal. So, I mean, just based on the research that we've been doing together, and he's really excited about going into graduate work in this field, and that's for I think that's for him a very positive outcome. Um, I know for me, in terms of my relationship with professors that I've had, you can't always keep in touch with everybody, but every once in a while, I've been able to sort of reach out to former professors, and just sort of keep asking them questions, or just say hi. And I remember when I was a graduate student, I was working on this problem, and it had to do with how the rate at which molecules sort of change their shape. And I remembered that one of my undergraduate research advisors at Florida State, Jack Saltiel, was an expert in in this area. And so I was like, huh, I wonder if I'm thinking about this right at all. So I wrote him a long letter, and he wrote back, very quickly saying, yes, this is all described in this paper that I wrote. You should have read this paper, but here it is. And it was fantastic. It was great timing, because I was striking out in an area where there wasn't anybody around. Right, there wasn't anybody there at Yale that I could talk to about that particular problem. There wasn't that expertise, and so because I had developed a relationship with him as an undergraduate student, as his advisee, it was easy to reach out to him as a graduate student and ask him a question. And I still get that. I still get former students and colleagues that reach out to me and ask me questions. Sometimes they might be teaching high school, and they get a question from a student, and they just don't know, how to answer that. And I'm able to help them with that, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So about the reaching out, so here at FSU, and I'm sure at a lot of other schools too, we have very big class sizes, as you know, for a lot of these STEM fields and things like that. How do you recommend in these bigger classes in particular, how students should reach out to their professor to like make themselves noticeable, I guess, to a professor?
Yeah, yeah. There's no probably simple thing. I do remember talking to my mom about that when I was a freshman, and my mom had lots of good advice, and she said, just walk up to them and say hi. And I said, okay. So when I had sat through a large lecture in botany, I just went up to the professor at the end of class. He was just sort of shuffling his papers, and I just sort of said hi and introduced myself and told him I was really enjoying his class, and that I had learned a little botany in high school, and it was great to learn so much more. And he was just dumbfounded. He said, I don't think I've ever had a student come up to me in this class before. But he loved it. He was really happy, and so we chatted for a little bit. He asked where I was from, and just why I was interested in botany and all that. And it was nice. I don't think we had too much of an interaction after that. But I was lucky, right? Because the first time I did it, I had the positive response, and if I'd had a negative response, I might not have ever done it again. But since it was positive, I continued doing that, and then after that, it often wasn't. Like the professor would just be like really in a hurry to leave, or whatever. So the second thing is office hours, right? So when I keep office hours, it's often lonely. Students don't come around too much unless there's going to be a test soon, and then or there's been a test, and they are coming with their hat in the hand saying, "What do I do to pass this class?" or whatever. Um, but the best thing you can do really is come in and meet the professor in office hours before the test. Just kind of introduce yourself, say, hi, I'm enjoying being in your class, and I just wanted to say hello. And that's it. That alone is a connection, so that when you come back, if you are having trouble, right, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember, come on in. They're going to be much more positive, you know about talking to you and helping you, and helping you deal with whatever the issue might be. So I think office hours are just an incredibly underused resource. Students don't go to office hours, and I won't say that all faculty are sitting around waiting for you to show up, but a lot of us are. and would really like it if students could find a few minutes to come find us. We also know, I know, that students are busy and you don't always have time to be doing all that. But if you can, I would strongly recommend it.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a very good point. So, further down the line for students who want to reach out to professors about research opportunities or professional endeavors in the future, how would you recommend students reach out to you about that?
Well, I think that first of all, um, it's still true that if you have already done that first thing, which is introduced yourself one way or another, it becomes a lot easier to tell whether that person would even be receptive to having a conversation about that, right? Because they're either friendly with you or they're not. But if they're friendly, right, then that hopefully will motivate you a little bit and help you get over the social barrier to want to ask about other things, including research possibilities. And so, honestly, every time that I've had a student who wanted to do research with me at Cooper Union, it's because they've come to see me during office hours and said, I've heard about the research that you're doing. I'm really interested in that. Could you tell me more about what you're doing? Um, and not, I sometimes it's not wrong to come out and say, I'd really like to work for you. But you could just start with, what are you, can you tell me more about what you're doing? I read about it on the website. You've talked about it in class. What kinds of projects are you working on now? I'm interested in this area. Yep. And but you also can, there's nothing wrong with just sticking your neck out. It just depends on your personality, and saying, all of that, all that I just said, and also I'm really interested in doing work with you. I would really love it if you would advise me on projects. 100% of the students that I have advised, this is what they did. Now, I will say, though, that although I have tried to say yes to every single student that has asked me that question, I have not been able to. Sometimes a prof can't say yes to you, even if they want to, because they might be just overburdened. They might have too many students that they're advising. They might have no resources, like in a laboratory. Sometimes you only have so much space or so much equipment or that sort of thing. But you shouldn't let yourself get too discouraged by that. One possibility is just to say, look, do you have any suggestions? Are there other faculty at Florida State that are working in this area and might have time for somebody like me? Uh, I understand you're busy, or you don't, or you're going to be away on sabbatical next year, or whatever it is. Um, See, mostly, I won't say this about all my colleagues, but I know for me personally, it definitely feeds my ego a little bit for somebody to come in and say, "Oh, I'm really interested in your work and what you're doing." That just absolutely is a flattering thing to hear. So naturally, if I can't say yes, I'm going to be like, is there somebody else that can help this student? But there are some things that don't seem to work as well. So, for example, my email to the department chair, uh, that did nothing. That did not result in, or my mail wasn't an email, my letter to the department chair, that did not result in any research opportunities for me within the biology department. So it really is about going up to people and talking to them, I think. Um, there's not going to be a bulletin board probably with undergraduate research opportunities. There's not going to be it's not going to be on Indeed. It's just not. So making these connections is going to help you so much, not only now, like right now as a student, but in the future. But you do have to find it in yourself to make those first steps, to take those first steps.
Yeah, thank you. So on the topic of connections, you spoke a little bit earlier about how past students of yours or people that you've worked with have reached out to you because they've had like some sort of trouble with something or wanted some advice. How do you think these types of professional relationships can benefit students beyond their time at FSU?
Yeah, I think some of it is a little intangible. You know, I'll tell my student, oh, you know, I'm always here for you as a resource. You know, we work together. If you never need me for a letter of recommendation, if a personal reference, anything like that that can help you in your career, you know, you can count on me. And of course, you know, as a student hearing something like that, it's really, you know, it makes you feel like, okay. Um, the these those sorts of things can be important. The ability to make connections with people is something that, if you're, you know, in industry, it's like, well, is this person going to fit into our organization? Are they going to be able to interact well with all of the things that we're doing here? And so, having formed a relationship with a faculty member, then they can testify to that a little bit. They can say, you know, we've had many interesting conversations about these things, and they came into the group and they worked really well with other people doing projects and helped this graduate student a lot. And we even got a, you know, a presentation with their work. You know, they can say fairly detailed things if they've gotten to know you, right? And so those those kinds of stories can have an impact on students' ability to get into that first uh, thing, to open that first door. They also, if you're looking to go to graduate school, they're really key. You know, they're when you're applying to doctoral work in chemistry and physics, at least I can testify. Obviously, they're looking at your grades, they're looking at your test scores, but you also are going to be providing, you know, letters of recommendation from faculty, and the faculty who have gotten to know you are the ones who can write the strong letters about you, and can really testify as to the good things that you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Topper. So that is the end of our questions. We would like to now open it up to the audience for any questions that you guys may have. If you guys want to send them in the chat or the Q&A box, please do so now. So, okay, we have one question. What are your thoughts about LinkedIn connections? And do you recommend students connect with their professors on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I think that LinkedIn is a good resource for a lot of things. I use it. I encourage my students to connect up with me on it, and that is a place where we tend to, you know, share announcements about good things, right? The thing about LinkedIn, of course, is that it's oriented around your professional presence, and your professional growth can very much be um, seen on it, right? So setting up a good, strong presence on LinkedIn, certainly, I think if you're going for positions in the industry, I think is a very good idea, because people will, if they decide that they're interested in your application, that is one of the things that they will look at. Uh, you know, they'll look to see if you are not only on LinkedIn, but you're connected with people. Being connected with faculty is even better, right? Because that means that, again, it's a tiny indication, but it's an indication that you have the ability to form those connections with people. And there are also recommendation systems on LinkedIn. I'm not sure that they're, you know, highly used or subscribed. In the early days, they were pretty much of a thing. I don't know anymore. But you know, it, it, the fact is that if people, yeah, you either should do nothing, right, at all on LinkedIn, or you should go into it with the attitude of, this is how I'm going to put forth a strong image about my professional goals, and my experience, you know, in a way that doesn't come across in a resume.
Yeah, thank you. So another question we just got is, what do you find to be the best way to build and maintain a relationship with your research PI?
Build and maintain. I think communication should happen frequently. If a good working relationship between me and a student generally involves me meeting with them regularly, that we have a scheduled regular meeting time once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on the nature of the work and the you know, but regardless, just, communicating, emailing, whatever it takes, right, to stay in touch, so that nobody's wondering whether that thing that they talked about is actually getting done or not getting done. Sometimes the communication is that thing we talked about is not getting done, uh, which is still really good to know. It's like, okay, well, it's not getting done. So why isn't it getting done? Are you just too busy? Is it too hard? We thought it would be easy. Uh, all of that. But when you just kind of go off by yourself and struggle with something, and the time goes by and you don't talk to your advisor about it, um, then it's just not as strong, right? It's not as positive as coming back and saying, I worked on this for a while, and this is how far I've gotten. Do you have any insight as to how we can, progress, or what do you think about what we've done so far? But that is a mistake. I mostly don't haven't had that problem too often with my students, but it has happened once or twice. And yeah. So just keep the communication going, right? Keep talking, keep asking questions, and if it's too much, right? I'm sure you'll get a signal about that, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, thank you. So another question, what strategies can students use to maintain and nurture their professional relationships with professors after they graduate? You mentioned a little bit about writing a recommendation for a student, but would you still write one 3 to 5 years out?
Oh, I might, especially if we've stayed in touch. It's much easier to do that if we've continued to talk once in a while. So an email every once in a while from a former student that's now a graduate student uh, definitely does not go amiss. Um, the fact is though, is that if you have a strong relationship with each other, and then a few years go by, uh, it's okay. Like I've had students that I haven't heard from in years, and they write me sort of out of the blue and say, it turns out I'm applying for this position with the federal government, and I need a reference. I need people that knew me for X years, and you were my research advisor for 4 years. So will you be one of those references? And of course, I could say, yes, absolutely. I'm glad to do that. Let me know how this goes, and what else is going on with you. And um, I remember one student that I had as a research advisor, kind of early on at Cooper Union. And he was kind of jointly advised with another colleague. And he went off, and he worked for a while, and then eventually took a PhD, and then became he started to head up a research consulting firm, and and I think that's what it was. Anyway, we were there. Our staying in touch was not perfect, but the point is that we did stay in touch. Every once in a while, I'd hear from him, he'd hear from me. We'd see each other at a meeting, and there was one point where he was able to help one of our students at Cooper find out about an internship program that he wouldn't have known about otherwise. And he was able to help his colleague, because his colleague really needed an intern to fill that position and didn't have anybody, because the funding had just sort of can't come at the last minute. And so we were able to help his friend, and we were also able to help one of our students, you know, uh, just because we stayed in touch a little bit. So I feel like I have a lot of stories like that. You know, the fact is that at least in the sciences, there are so many connections, and people are connected to one another in ways that they sort of aren't always aware of. Um, there was a person that I have worked with. There was this thing I used to run called the Electronic Computational Chemistry Conference. It was an early online conference in computational chemistry. And one of the people I sort of pulled into it, I had never met in person, but I really liked the things that she said and did, and so we started working together. And then I realized that she was a colleague of Jack Saltiel here at Florida State, and so it was. Uh, so there's so many, I didn't know that. So there's so many connections between people that if you can just manage to keep things going and keep talking to each other, sometimes they really will be very fruitful, and you can learn how to help each other. Professionalism is all about networking, right? So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm just going to apply for every job that I see that's listed online and Indeed and whatever. But the fact is that you're much more likely to get into good professional opportunities on a personal basis. It's not that it's impossible to get a good job that way, but I think that a lot of job seekers find that they get better positions just by networking, using their network. Right. So staying in touch is the key to that.
Yeah, thank you. So we got a little shout out to Cooper Union in the chat.
Ah,
So thank you for that, Jack. And then another question is, how can I, as a student, effectively balance my academic responsibilities with networking activities to ensure I'm making the most out of my time?
yeah, that's a great question. It's so hard to answer though, because the balance, right? There's so many things that you have to keep in balance as a student. You have your classes and your classwork responsibilities. You may have a job that you have to keep track of. I worked all of my time at Florida State. I had part-time jobs pretty much every semester. Um, and I was lucky with Jack specifically that one of those part-time jobs was working in his laboratory. That was one of those wonderful situations where not only was I having a great time and learning experimentation in the laboratory, but was actually getting paid a little something to do it. Um, but and then like I said, the chemistry fraternity and other things that I was doing, keeping it all in balance. I really don't know. The fact is that you have to make sure, from your perspective, when enough is enough and too much is too much, and how to step back, and that's really a very um, individual kind of thing. You have to prioritize. I think that is the key, right? You have to prioritize. Certainly, if I wasn't doing well in my schoolwork, I would have cut way back on other things, right? Because for me, my schoolwork was my first priority. But I think that for me as a scientist, like doing research and learning about that, that's also part of my learning. So those were both kind of pretty much up there. And for me as a student, they didn't come into conflict with one another. The more I did research, the better I did in my classwork, because I had more context for the things that I was learning in my classwork. Um, when your problems are open-ended, then you just have to look for solutions broadly, any place you can find them. And then you start to see how the things that you were studying in this class interact with this big picture over here that you've been trying to delve into. So um, again, I think I would have stepped back on some of the social activities if I'd had to. But for me personally, right, there was never a conflict between spending time networking, interacting with faculty, and doing well in my classes. In fact, it was the opposite. They weren't in tension for me. They both made each other better.
Another question, what is your favorite FSU memory?
Hmm. Oh, that's a good one. Um, I think that there's a long list, but I'm gonna just real quickly tell you, I guess, the Dirac story. Um, Paul Dirac was on the faculty when I was here, physics professor. I'm sure you've seen the Dirac library and the statue. But for us at the time, he was this older gentleman in a black suit who would meticulously and slowly walk from one end of campus to the other end of campus every day. He took a constitutional, and his home was at the other end of campus, right? So he would just kind of, and I just remember I remember two things about that. One is just seeing when I finally figured out who he was, uh, seeing him go by the dorm one day. I think it was Sally Hall, and just kind of grabbing everybody in the room when I saw him go by. It's like, look, that guy's smarter than the entire campus put together. He's he invented quantum mechanics. So I don't know. I was just so excited to be on the same campus as somebody like that. But the other memory I have is meeting him, which was quite a trip. Um, I had a friend whose father was a mathematics professor, and the Diracs were looking for a house sitter. And so I was asked if I would do it. And so I said, yes, I would like to do that very much. So I went to their home. I was interviewed by Mrs. Dirac, and she, asked me lots of questions, made sure I wasn't going to have any parties. It's like, you can have a friend over, that's okay, as long as it's a short visit. It's like, yeah, that's okay. And by the way, you can use his library as long as you put things right back where they were. And I said, oh, that would be fantastic. So eventually she thought that I would do, and she said, would you like to go and meet um, Professor Dirac? And I said, yes, I would. So we went back into his study, and I don't know, I thought he'd be standing in front of a chalkboard writing something, or sitting at a desk scribbling. But he was sitting in his easy chair with his feet up and his shoes off, watching soap operas, um, which was not what I expected at all. But I didn't know about Dirac. Apparently, he had a reputation for not really saying very much. If he was going to answer a question, he would answer it in a word. You know, maybe three if necessary. Um, so I don't know what I was expecting, but she brought me in, said, "This is Mr. Topper. He's going to be watching the house while we go to visit the children." Their children lived in England, and he's a physics physics and chemistry major. And when he heard that, he turned his head and looked at me and said, "Why?" And then I don't know, I babbled something about, chemistry and physics and molecules being sort of halfway between quantum mechanics and classical mechanics, and I wanted to learn, more about that. And I don't know, I just kind of babbled for a while. And then he sort of, he took that all in, and he just kind of grunted and went back to watching his soap opera, and that was it. So afterwards, I was sort of like, well, he didn't, that wasn't great, but at least I'm going to get the job, and I don't think he thought I was a fool. So the next day, I went to see my physics professor after class. I'd gotten to know him a little bit because I'd been, talking with him. And so after class, I said, I went to visit Professor Draken's wife yesterday. And he said, "Really?" how did it go? It's like, I don't think it went very well. But he did ask me a question. And he went, Dirac asked you a question? He has never asked me a question. And he considered himself to be pretty good friends with Dirac. So that was my favorite memory, is that I actually got a Nobel laureate in physics to ask me a question.
Gosh, that story sounds so intimidating, but so cool at the same time.
Yeah, but if I hadn't gotten myself over the hump all those times to talk to professors, then I never would have had that chance, right? I never would have, you know. So it's like a lot of things. The first time you do it, it's kind of hard, and then you just keep doing it and you keep doing it, and then you realize, well, they're just people like me, they're older, so I should take pity on them a little bit, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's you have good things to share with your professors. I think that's really a key thing to remember, is that yes, they have things that they can share with you, but you also have things that you can share with them, and that is a big reason why a lot of us become professors in the first place.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Wow. Okay, so on the total opposite side of the spectrum, what kind of music do you play?
Oh, mostly 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s rock, and some folk music. Yeah, I'm working on the bass guitar these days.
I've always wanted to be good at the bass guitar, so props to you.
I hope to someday. It's intimidating. My brother is a really excellent bassist, so it's lot to measure up to. My family is pretty musical, so that's also another sort of like, it's a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I understand. I'm the same way. So, what is one final piece of advice that you can offer current students as they leave this session?
Well, I remember when I was in graduate school, and talking to a professor, who we were allowed to take out to dinner because he was there for a seminar. And he said, the best time of my life was when I was a grad student. That it was the best because I got to do all this research and I didn't have these other kinds of responsibilities about, you know, finding funding for my research group and dealing with the politics of the university and all of that. So, you should enjoy and take advantage of everything you can while you can. So I would say the same thing to all of you as undergraduates. You have so many resources available to you. There's so many people that you'll have the opportunity to know, so many friends you'll get to make, and mistakes that you'll make. But this is the place to make those friends, to make those connections, and to make those mistakes. And don't let fear of failure stop you from trying things. This is the time in your life when you really can do that, and so try to find ways to try new things, to challenge yourself, and follow your bliss and enjoy your time in school.